Welcome back. So a question I've had asked of me, and I thought, that'd make for a good video is, which team would I bring back? And why would it be the Vancouver Blazers or the Philadelphia Blazers? So this is a WHA jersey, if anybody's curious. The Blazers, one of the many teams that came and went during the WHA's time. So I thought, okay, I'm going to make up a list. And I'm going to make up a list of teams that existed in the WHA, teams in the NHL that are defunct or moved, and teams in the PCHA, and I tried to keep it to cities where we do not currently have NHL teams for the most part, but I'll explain this. So, let's just say the NHL was going to go to 40 teams, because there were rumors about a decade ago now that maybe 40 teams is where the NHL would want to go, and maybe have a European division. It was very pie in the sky. It doesn't end up happening. I don't think there's any chance it actually happens, but let's just say you have 40 teams, right? So looking at the WHA, first off, you got the Houston Aeros. Well, the Houston Aeros, I think, is going to happen in the National Hockey League anyways. I don't know when. I don't know how. I really think that, everybody's picking on the Coyotes. I'm not going to pick on them at all in this video. But I do think that the Houston Aeros, good spot. Cincinnati Stingers, I'd love to see another team in Ohio. Be honest. As a Bengals fan, I'd be very happy. I'd have Stingers merchandise. You bring back the Stingers. That's the thing. These teams would have to use the same names. Now, Hartford Whalers, although in the WHA they were the New England Whalers, I would be perfectly fine with New England Whalers. The Boston Bruins might have a word to say about that. Quebec Nordiques, I'm perfectly fine, of course, with bringing back the Quebec Nordiques. Cleveland Crusaders. So I opted to put the Crusaders on the board instead of the Barons because I think Crusaders, kind of a better looking logo than the Barons had. Indianapolis Racers, of course, that's where Wayne Gretzky's career started. He had a little cup of coffee with the Racers before he went to the Oilers. Birmingham Bulls. So there you go. WHA teams, those were the ones I picked. For the NHL, for defunct or moved, Montreal Wanderers. They lasted very few games the first season for the NHL. Why not bring back the Wanderers? The idea was simple that there were two teams in Montreal. We ended up with the Montreal Maroons, and one was for English-speaking Montreal, and one was for French-speaking Montreal. And so, that's an interesting concept. I don't think there's a problem with that. But yeah, the thing is now I don't know that it would work. I don't know that you could have basically this is the French Canadian, this is the English Canadian. I don't know that it would work. Hamilton Tigers. I'm a fan of Hamilton as a city and the idea of the NHL being there. Sure. If anybody's going to say, well, they just lost the Bulldogs, there are reasons the Bulldogs moved out of Hamilton. Brooklyn Americans. Brooklyn is obviously an exception as well, but New York's huge. You could support a bunch of NHL teams there. Kansas City Scouts. Of course, Kansas City has been rumored to be in the mix for NHL teams dating back to the early 2000s. Atlanta Thrashers. We know all about the Atlanta Thrashers and the idea that maybe the Thrashers could come back. And I know the opinions on that. And then you get into the PCHA. So when the NHL was in its beginnings, the PCHA was its rival league. The Pacific Coast Hockey Association, pretty good hockey, pretty good players. We saw that when the Victoria Cougars transitioned over to the NHL. Good team. And so, yeah, some of the players from the PCHA end up in the NHL, but the PCHA didn't survive. But you had the Portland Rosebuds, the Victoria Aristocrats, who later changed the name to Cougars and, of course, moved to Detroit. But Aristocrats, that's a fantastic name for a hockey team. What would you call them, the Krats? Anyways. And the Spokane Canaries. I cannot say that Spokane Canaries is not a fantastic name. To the Spokane Chiefs, I say, this is a better name. Canaries is fantastic. So, if we're looking at this from a point of view of the NHL would want teams in certain locations. Houston, obviously to me, Houston is an absolute must. They go into the Central Division. For the Central Division as well, and this is where things get tricky right away, Kansas City Scouts. So you have the Kansas City Scouts, the Houston Aeros are resurrected and join the Central. Then the Pacific Division, and it does get tricky. I do think Portland can support a team. I absolutely think they can. And then all of them are on the East Coast except for Spokane or Victoria. And neither of those locations are ones that I would say are National Hockey League level. I don't think there's enough of a population in either location. So, do we get creative? Or do I come back to it? Yeah, I'll come back to it. So then we go to the Atlantic Division, and of course, for the Atlantic, it's Hartford, it's Quebec, and everybody stops talking about it, right? It has to be Hartford and Quebec. It just has to be. And then you get into the Metro. For the Metro, I mean, Atlanta doesn't fit in the Metro, do they? Because then you'd have Tampa Bay and Florida, and the Metro's and then Atlanta's in a different division. Ha. And look at that. I don't have a Canadian team. I don't have a Canadian. I'm a terrible Canadian. I've done it. That's awful. Maybe that works then for the Montreal Maroons or the Montreal Wanderers. You put them in a different division than Montreal, than the Habs. So you have the Habs in one division and another Montreal team in another. Sure, the travel for the other Montreal team ends up being garbage, but the Canadians would say, bon nuit. All right, so Metro. I feel like doing something kind of crazy for the Metro. You know what? Birmingham, Alabama. Sure, why not? Because I assume Birmingham Bulls, Alabama. And let's bring back the Brooklyn Americans. I've done videos on the Brooklyn Americans and their demise and how they were done dirty. I believe it was Red Dutton that was running the team. Yeah, done dirty. And the New York Rangers' long curse when it comes to not winning a Stanley Cup was partly traced back to the treatment of the Brooklyn Americans. So let's bring back the Brooklyn Americans. And now I'm back on the West Coast, right? I'm back on the West Coast. So I'm gonna cheat a little bit here. So back in the early 80s, Saskatoon almost got the Blues. I'm going to say we have two teams named Blues. If the CFL can have two teams named Rough Riders and they're okay and it works for decades before Ottawa went under, I will say the NHL could have two teams named Blues. You could call them the Sask Blues and the St. Louis Blues, no problem. But whatever you want to name the team, I'll say sure. Saskatoon, because I need a team in the Pacific. And that takes us to 8 teams. And then that way, I do have a Canadian team in Quebec, so I'm good. Quebec and Saskatoon would join the league. You'd have 2 more Canadian teams and 6 more in the U.S. My math is a little bit off because it's the off season, so my brain's kind of like, yeah, no, I'm done. But again, then I look at this and I'm like, I'm not bringing back Cleveland or Cincinnati. The funny thing is that when I was asked which team I would bring back, I said Cincinnati Stingers. And here I am trying to figure out how I'd make this work, and Cincinnati's not in there. So Columbus is in the Metro. You know what? I am very sorry to the memory of Red Dutton. I need to do another video on that. But I'm gonna not do the Brooklyn Americans. I'm gonna do the Cincinnati Stingers. I'm a Cincinnati fan. I just am. Based on the Bengals, it'd be great to have an NHL team in Cincinnati as well. Sure. Which reminds me, there's no San Diego team on the board, but for me to do that, I'd have to go through all the other leagues. And I do have a book called Total Hockey. If you look it up on eBay, you can probably find it for $5-10. It is absolutely huge. It has everything hockey related in every single hockey league that ever existed from the turn of the 20th century right up until it was published. And there's a lot of stuff in there I have not been able to find on the internet. I know when I start going through some of my history books and doing stuff in videos, I'll sometimes see comments like, oh, I never heard about that. Yeah, because it's not on the internet. Not everything is necessarily on the internet, especially if it's old material from pre-internet days. Some of it does slip by the wayside. So I'm going to apologize to Brooklyn. I'm going to apologize to Atlanta, Hamilton, Montreal for not getting 2 teams. But yeah, so that's Central, Atlantic, and then Metro. Yeah, Cincinnati's in the Metro. Sorry. I am used to Cincinnati being in the Central in the NFL. And then, of course, Pacific, there's Central for Kansas City, and then Pacific for Portland, and Pacific for Saskatoon. And I think people will be happy with that. What's that, Salt Lake City? Yeah, Salt Lake City's not on the board. But anyways, there you go. So that would take us to 40 teams. So which teams would I bring back? Those are the 8. But again, when I was asked, I said Cincinnati Stingers, and it was right away because I have a beautiful Stingers jersey. It's all set to go if Cincinnati ever gets a team. And it really, there are a lot of cities that I think the NHL could work in. It's a very common topic. People bring it up all the time. But it really comes down to where the National Hockey League thinks it's going to work, and having built-in fan base, making sure that you have enough talent to go around with the league, and that it's going to work from a broadcasting perspective from every angle you have to look at it. And so, yeah, we'll see if we ever get any more expansion. I think eventually we do, but it's going to be a while. Let me know your thoughts in the comment section below, as always. Don't forget to hit like and subscribe if you're browsing your way through. You just happened upon this video. Thank you guys so much for watching, for all your support. I will talk to you again soon.